Arnaud, hello, thanks to be there at this time of the day. I'm Sebastien Charrier. I am the founder of bump.sh. We talk about it a bit later. You can find me anywhere on the internet under S. Charrier nickname. Do not hesitate to ping me during this talk or after. I'm always glad to ask to any question, and I would just like to start by saying that this is an important day for me. It's the first time ever I speak publicly in English, and I would like, I just would like to start by saying thank you to my English school teacher, because it took me 20 years to be able to do that today. So yeah, no. You are not here to hear about me, but about APIs. So let's start with a short story about APIs. This is a story of a guy whose name is Jean-Claude, which is a pretty common name in French. Jean-Claude works in a French company which sells train tickets. And at some point, this Jean-Claude, who is the lead developer of the payment API of this French company, a French company which sells a lot of train tickets a day. The management of Jean-Claude comes and say, okay, we have a really good idea. We would like to start selling train tickets to people, to users without any account of the platform. This is a really big change because it means that you need to handle now anonymous requests. But Jean-Claude is a pretty good developer. He knows how to do this job. And he says, yes, we will do that. So he works for a week. He writes a lot of code. He writes a lot of unit tests, a lot of integration tests, and at some point, he's ready to push this to production. And obviously, it works super well. Everything breaks. No more payment works or certain versions of the mobile applications. So we roll back the change, and the team starts working on why this happened. And they found that in one commit, in one specific change, there was a really small, tiny, fucking breaking change. This header, which already existed, at some point became required, and some old mobile application just didn't know that, didn't send this header. So when the change came and went to production, this old mobile application just stopped working on payment. We could just say that this normal and technical issue, Jean-Claude just broke this API, but I think that it's more a human issue. It's more about communicating between teams and knowing what's changing than just fixing a technical issue. So this story was more about people, and all this talk will be more about people, even if we talk about something which is really technical. My point is that this story could happen to maybe anyone in this room, and I think that it will happen to anyone in this room at some point in the upcoming years. To understand this, I just want to go back a few years ago. This is an API ecosystem 15 years ago. Mostly one public API, probably some REST API. This is the same ecosystem, let's say 10 years ago, with more services. We start calling external services. And this is the same ecosystem today with more and more API than ever, more technologies than ever. Now we have GraphQL, REST API obviously, event-driven APIs, everything mixed inside the same ecosystem. But we also have more people than ever working around those APIs. For a long time, it was just engineers speaking to other engineers. Now we have product people, we have marketing people, and all of those persons needs to understand what's happening in the API ecosystem. So we are in a more challenging than ever time, but in the meantime, developers still hate everything that keeps them from coding. You know what I mean? No. And the issue is really big. I'm not the only one that says that. This is a quote from Gartner, which says that by 2025, less than 50% of API will be correctly managed. This is tomorrow, and this is big. So how can we do? Oh, sorry, no, not how can we do. This is what's going to happen. We'll see new kind of APIs emerge in the upcoming years and weeks. The first one is zombie APIs, which are API you know or don't know that exist. You know or don't know if somebody uses them. You also have rogue APIs that will emerge. clone ones, because if you don't know that an API exists as a developer, you will just build the same one. And yes, Rogue One is the best Star Wars ever. We can discuss this tonight if you want. And to avoid that, we need to create another kind of APIs. We need to create APIs that are discoverable, reusable, compliant, and secure. And those are the pillars of good API governance policy. And yes, it needs to be 100% automated. You know what? You know why. This is when you say hello to API schemas, which are really part of this solution. So what is an API schema? I obviously asked to ChatGPT. I also asked to ChatGPT to create a conference about API schemas, and it worked pretty well. But yeah, what is an API schema? This is a pretty good definition, but I think it's a bit too much REST-oriented, because we talk about endpoints here. I generally say that an API schema should be a machine-readable file when you have a description of what can be done with an API and how the API will behave. So is this new? Let's just test my age here. I know there is a common rule that says that you don't talk about your SOAP APIs, but please raise your hand here if you have already worked or built some SOAP APIs. I am not the oldest one here. So yeah, this is not a really recent concept. We knew API schema since SOAP APIs, but they were slow, complex to use, and yes, it was XML. So it was a bit painful to use. So we started to build REST APIs because it's far more simpler. We don't have to create API schemas. And we built dozens of APIs, REST APIs for years without documenting them. And we know, everybody here know that we messed up at some point. But I have a good news, which is that now the ecosystem is finally ready for two main reasons. The first one is that we have a lot of API specification right now, which allows you to write API schemas for mainly any API technology. You can build API schema for REST API, for event-driven API with async API, for RPC API, for GraphQL. And this new API specification will continue to evolve in the upcoming years. But the other good news is that we now have the powerful tools that know how to handle those API specifications. One question which is regularly asked to us at Bump is what can we do with API schema? And the first answer to that question is regularly, documentation. I think that it's the first use of API schema right now. You have plenty of tools that allow you to create really professional documentation just from your API schema. This is an example of bump.sh, but you have really good open source tools like Redoc or other SaaS platform like Stoplight or README. But you can do a lot more with your API schema. This is something that I really love. You have two different products here. Optic, I think that Aidan, the founder of Optic, will speak later today here. Those two tools just come on your GitHub pull request and analyze what's happening in your API schema and do this summary of, okay, this is happening in your API ecosystem. And so now you can see if something fails as a check or if you have a breaking change. This before your code is merged and so deployed to production. I love this one, which is an example of unit test written in Ruby. We basically just do GET request on some endpoints, and we check that the code answer matches with the API schema, which is a part of an open API file. This means that if you change your code without updating this API schema, you will have a warning. If you update your API signature without updating your code, you will have a warning. This will break. You can obviously generate some code, mostly some client code, but also some server side. At some point, we have more and more generators for this. Open API generator works, but I think that we still have some work to do on it before it becomes nice to read and to use. But the idea is here, and already today you can build some really interesting things. This is a tool I love, even if it's built by a competitor of us, which name is Spectral. It was basically a linter at the beginning, but it's far more powerful than a linter because you can describe your own custom rules, which means that you can kind of code your governance policy directly to validate your OpenAPI or async API file. So it's not just about saying, is my OpenAPI file valid? It's more, is this API I'm currently designing valid according to my company governance policy? And we are now seeing a new wave of security testing tools, which now are fully aware of API schemas. And so you can far more than ever generate security tests without all the hassle. What is the conclusion of all this automation? The first one is that obviously Jean-Claude should have used an API schema with his API. But besides this, I think that it's just the beginning of a lot of things that we can automate with API schemas. And this will clearly be more and more powerful in the upcoming years. If we have applied this to our payment API at the beginning of this talk, it will be secure, at least more secure, compliant with the governance policy, mostly reusable because we have a schema, we have a documentation, but still not discoverable in the ecosystem. And I think that to fix this final step, there is one more step, which is that we need to aggregate everything in the same place. I usually call that building a single source of truth. And the idea here is that we know that all your API schema are anywhere in your infrastructure or in your company way of organizing, but at some point you need to fetch them in one single source of truth, and around this single source of truth you will build your automations. With this, you can be sure that anyone in your company can find any information about your API, knows what's changing, and validate that everything works correctly. This is Jean-Claude at the end of the day, because now he knows how to build a future-proof API ecosystem. If you have two things to remember about this, the first one would be that, yeah, API schema can and should be the anchor point of your whole API ecosystem. But the other thing is far more important to me. I think that it's really just technical things, a technical fix to a human issue, which is how do we synchronize each other in the same ecosystem. And yes, in 2023, you will still build APIs for human beings. It's developers who write the code of the API, and it's still developers that write the code which consumes those APIs. Then, wow! Just before we take some question, a small word about Bump. We help people creating this single source of truth. So if you want to test the product, you have a specific address here. And also we are hiring actively. So if you want to work in a fun and human-centered company, just come and see us. We have a small booth just at the end of, just on the left here. Yeah, thanks a lot.
And we even have time for questions in English or French. So,
merci.
All right, any questions? Yes, here.
Thank you, awesome presentation.
Thank you.
I wonder, like, when you designed this talk, like, did you have in mind, like, it's contract first only, or we can, like, do first our code, generate the spec, and then do all these things?
We really try to not take a position here at Bump. I have a personal opinion, but I think it really depends. All this talk is designed. I think that all my points works for code first or design first. I don't think that it changed anything. At some point, you need an API schema. I I never thought that design first is better than code first. I think it really depends of the situation. I know here some people who has a really different opinion than mine. No, no, not yet. But yeah, all of this works for both situations, in my opinion.
Design first here. That was my talk. You didn't. How do you manage drift between when you have multiple APIs? You have subschemas, right? You have the address.
Yeah.
How do you manage drift across different APIs when you're not design first?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think that the way of reusing some sub-schema is probably one of the most difficult challenge for all the API schema vendors like we are. We need at some point something that I call an API schema registry. I think you need, even if it's not all at the same point at the beginning, you need to have this at some point if you want to be able to synchronize and watch what's happening. So yeah.
Oh my God! So coming back.
I see you are not
HDDI plus WDDX.
The other option is not to have dependencies between your schemas.
Yeah. This is a funny one because most of our customers at Bump have this kind of issues, and we have worked a lot on resolving those dependencies. One thing that we have still not yet resolved is how you know that just when dependencies have changed and how you propagate this change until your main specifications. And I think that there is still something to invent on this.
And we have reached the end of the time. So warm applause for Sebastien.